Sometimes trying to get the Droid Cam to work and stay working is the biggest challenge. It's running for now. Who knows how long that'll last. Alright, working on a cutting board. Here's what I have so far. This is the starting point for today's stream, which is to say that the wood's already bound together and glued, and I really just need to kind of run it through the planer quite a bit to get it down to the right speed. So I'll be doing a bit of that, and while I'm doing that I'll have to mute the sound so you guys don't get blasted out by it. So I'm going to do that now, and I'll be checking back in occasionally while I'm working on it. Hello, and hello, Evil We are, welcome in, Raiders. Normally on my stream I do a bunch of science stuff. Occasionally I also do some woodworking and sometimes photography. So today I'm working on a cutting board. That's this thing here. And let's see if I can give you a nice good look at it on the little camera here. Hopefully you can sort of see. It's a giant cutting board. It's super thick, and this is just one I'm working on right now. And I put this together last night. It's thank you, Evo. It's made from maple on the outside edge, right here. Oops, it looks like my Droid Cam froze again. Super buggy software. Let's move over here anyway, and see if I can get that on the cutting board. It's got a little bit of a glare to it, which I apologize for, but oh, well, thanks for bringing people in, Yay Science Twitch. Earlier today I was doing a scanning electron microscope stream with my graduate student Laura. We were looking at diatoms on a scanning electron microscope from somewhere between 40 and 60,000 years ago from the Mono Lake Basin. And for today, for the afternoon here, I was working on this cutting board. So this lighter colored wood that's on the outside, that's the frame, is maple, hard maple. And then this wood that's next to it is Iroko, which is sometimes called African teak. And then this sort of lighter brown wood that's right here on either side mirroring the center is black walnut. And this very dark wood that's right here in the middle is wengi, which is probably the most expensive wood on the board. But I just have a little strip of it. And I'm working on this as a Christmas gift for my my nephew. So he asked for a cutting board. He put it on his Christmas list. It felt like he was trying to send me a message because he knows that I make cutting boards. And the one that he put on there was a hardwood teak cutting board. It was a little bit bigger than this, believe it or not. Like, he wanted something even bigger. And this is a massive cutting board. So that's 23 inches wide and, long, and the width is about 13 inches. That's all that fits into my planer, which is sort of a limitation for my instrument for collecting those. Thank you for the follow, Dr. Sigeti. And so I started off yesterday with just the pieces of Iroko and walnut and wengi from boards that look like this. Sorry, can't see them. And trimmed them down, glued them together with these woods, and now we have the cutting board. This thing's more like a table than a cutting board at the moment. It's just super massive, and that's sort of the way he wanted it. So the one that he had selected was pretty much like this, only he had it all teak. But I thought, I can do better with some sort of mixed woods in here to make it look a little prettier. So yeah, they're very high. They're very high quality woods. This wengi is like that little block of wood I was showing you cost almost $100. So just this block in the middle here is pretty expensive. And then African teak is also a really nice wood. So what I'm going to do next is I need to get rid of these hard corners all the way around, which I usually manage by, I could sand them. I could also use a hand planer. I saw Cheng Mania doing that. He's another streamer here. on Twitch was making a cutting board the other day. He did all of it by planing it by hand. I'm old, and for me, that's like, my hands can't really handle that sort of intensive pushing down on the wood sort of stuff. So I usually just use my router. So that's what we'll be doing. I've got a hand router, and I'm going to change out the bits on it. So right now it's got a 1/2 inch round over on it, which would round this. But I like to just round it a little bit at a time, and I think what I'm going to do for this one is stop at 1/4 inch rather than taking it all the way up to a 1/2 inch for the round over on it. So I need to switch out the bits, and I usually start with an 1/8 inch, and then I move up to the 1/4 inch, and then I move up to the 1/2 inch to take it off a little bit at a time and see whether I like it, or rather how much I like it. My wife tells me that bigger blocks like these that people use for cutting boards typically are have a little bit sharper edge on them. So I probably would naturally have gone with the 1/2 inch, but she's got me convinced that we need to stop at 1/4. So always with the router, it's not plugged in when you changing the bits, because you could accidentally turn it on, and then this is the most dangerous instrument in my wood shop. This thing will not stop for anything, basically, and I'd prefer to keep all of my fingers intact. So I just need to get the cutting edge flush so I don't have a lip or an indentation anywhere. And then I gotta tighten this back down in here. And then, I apologize, but you're gonna have to go back onto mute because the noise associated with this thing is probably still a bit too much for you coming through on my microphone. And I don't think you want to experience the really loud power tools without any sort of ear protection like I have. But I can kind of position this so you can see what I'm doing. And yeah, I think that's it. So I'm going to mute you for a bit. You'll just have to listen to the music. Thank you, Madam Annalisa. And no, I just use normal abrasives, high open set. For sanding, I usually use an orbital sander, which is this device. And then I just start with sort of like a 120 and work my way down to a 300 or something like that. But this is the sort of work that I usually do for cutting boards. So I'm going to mute you guys. You'll just have to listen to the music a little bit, and then I'm going to route around the edge to round it down. I'll probably go around all the way around on all sides, and then I'll unmute it so I can change out the bit again to switch us back. So, okay, enjoy the music for a little bit. It's just pretzel rock, but it's what you get.
Good news, everyone!
First step with the router, actually, you can see how smooth it runs the corners just really quickly, and how big of a difference it makes in the appearance just to round it a little bit like that. It really makes a huge sort of visible difference on the way that we sort of observe the edge pieces, basically, when they're rounded. It just seems so much gentler, basically. Alright, so that's the 1/8 round over. And this is the 1/4. And again, I just need to align a height so that I don't have any of the router, the edge of the blade of the router, cutting down into the table, or the cutting block. So we get a nice smooth corner. And that's locked back in, so we're going to run this around the outside of both sides again, and that'll be it for the routering. It's pretty easy, pretty short process. Routering is really simple. Just for clarity, as long as I have it here and you're looking at it, the router bit has it has a little round piece here that rolls along the edge of your piece of whatever it is that you're rounding, and then a blade on both sides that cuts, right? So it can't get any closer than the rounding wheel. Alright, I unplugged it while I was touching the bit, by the way. You should always, have the tools off, keep your fingers safe, be smart. Alright, we're going to run it around the outside edge of it. Hey, sorry about that long delay. Uh, so this piece of wood, let's see, who is this is asking? Uh, Tentex? This piece of wood is actually something that I glued together So the original pieces of wood are just chunks like this maple, and this is the black walnut that I used. That's this little components on either side of the middle board. And then I have some wengi that we used also for this middle piece. And then I cut all of them sized them and dimensioned them using the planer, and then glued them together into one big board, and cut them so that they had a nice straight edge on the ends, and then planed this down. So at the beginning of the stream, that's what I was doing, was basically flattening this side and flattening this side, because there's a little bit of height offset in the boards. It was not perfect. And the lumber that I used to make this piece for the cutting board, before I glued them together, I bought at Northwest Lumber, which is in Indianapolis, and really a great little store for woodworking. They sell all kinds of these sort of craft woods, and for these ones, they're sort of geared for cutting boards in the sense that they come out, these are what they call 8/4, which just means it's 2 inches thick basically. And then the length for these is all about 23, 24 inches long. So, can I explain how the clamps work? Yeah. So these are just quick grip clamps, and you can actually push them without clipping them. And I was just clamping them down so that when I run the router, the board doesn't move. In this case, they just have a little trigger release, and when that's up, the clamp won't move. When it's pressed, it will. Right? So just pinching in the metal with a spring. And then these are just quick clamps, so I can just tighten them with a hand piece. And really that's just to keep the board from shifting, because I'm moving a power tool along it, and I don't want it to be dangerous for my hands when I do that. So here I've routed the edge the way that I want. So I think you can see that, but I can move it a little bit closer so you can kind of see the edges are rounded. Beveled really, but they're rounded in the sense that the bit that I used has a bit of an arc to it like this. So this is actually the 1/2 inch round. That's the 1/8. I haven't used the 1/2 inch on there. These were all done with the 1/8 and a 1/4 inch round that I've used to round over the edges. And these boards were all glued together, and then I clamped them using very large clamp systems that I have to basically hold the boards together so that they would dry with the glue clamped together. And on my Christmas list I have some pipe clamps that I wanted to actually use for cutting boards. But this is a Christmas gift, so I have to make it before I actually get those, if I get them. But I'm hoping that I get some nice pipe clamps, because it actually allows me to clamp the boards a little bit more easily than the way that I do it currently, which is just using these bigger clamps that I have here. So for these, the heavy work is done. The board is basically shaped the way it's going to be shaped. And what I'm down to is just improving the finish. So this has a, probably you can't see it, but there's a slight bite in the edge of the board right here from going through the planer on both sides. There's a little bit of a bite right here when the blades first interact with the board. And so that'll be sanded down with just, I think I'll probably use the 120 sandpaper on the orbital sander that I have. And then I'll probably jump up to 220 and then a 330 or 300 or something. You're watching from Italy. It's very late. Good night. Ah, thank you, Annalisa. And thanks for coming in. I'm assuming you came in with the raid. Um, it's very nice to have viewers here. This isn't normal content, although I have made cutting boards on stream before, and I made a kalimba on Twitch as well for my fellow streamers. So this one is actually for my nephew. So if you see him, don't tell him. It's a Christmas present. But the things that I've made, I actually made them for Twitch streamers. So they're friends of mine, and sent them off to them. So the kalimba actually arrived with my friend Hannah about 2 days ago. She got it. She got home from Croatia, and so she's been tuning it and I think practicing with it. So maybe she'll actually play it on her stream, which would be really nice. We'll see. So I'm just gonna. This is, as I mentioned, this is 150. So, and I really like these orbital sanders. This one is a amazing little tool. Again, it makes a lot of noise because it's a power tool, but it's a random orbital sander, which means that I can push it in a straight line and it won't put straight grooves in my my wood because it moves randomly. Basically, it allows me to sand things very easily without pushing down or putting a lot of pressure on it. But again, it makes a lot of noise. All of the instruments in here, the tools make a lot of noise. So I'm going to mute it again, and then I'm going to sand the sides down, and probably I'll unmute it when I switch out to the next sandpaper. So you can feel free to listen to the music, watch me work, and if you have things to say, I'll try to pay attention to them. Maybe I can unmute for a little bit because the sander's easier to control. It's really a simple tool. So just chill out and watch if you'd like. And thanks for hanging out with me. Hope you enjoy the woodworking.
Good news, everyone!
well, sanding is basically done. That was a 150 grit, and I'm going to put on a slightly finer grit sanding paper. I have 320, and I think I also have some 220, but it's pretty soft already. But I think I'm going to do like a really quick brush down with the 220, and then I'm going to switch to the 320, and then it'll be done. Other than just putting on the cutting board oil. So one quick run over with the 220, and then a quick run over with the 320, and then I'll be back to talk to chat. Yeah, my hands are fine. Everything's fine. The orbital sander doesn't actually require you to push down on it very hard. So it's just basically like moving stuff over the surface. You know, normally when you sand, before I got the orbital sander, I just hated sanding. It was like my least favorite part because it just was so painful to sand everything, and my hands would basically be super tired and cramp up after a little bit. But I think since I got the orbital sander, I don't even mind it. Actually, I like sanding. I like sort of feeling it. Yeah, I still have all my fingers, Dr. Dirt. And I just love that it's so easy to take this thing, to take off the sanding papers. That was the other thing that kind of drove me nut about block sanding, is that the sandpaper would wear down and then it would just be this giant hassle. But this is basically just Velcro. And you'll note that it's got little holes in the sandpaper, and that is actually because it has a vacuum. It pumps the dust that you're sanding into the instrument, and it's actually captured in a little dust bag. So while I was wearing a mask while I was sanding, but I really don't even need to. There's hardly any dust generated by this type of orbital sander. So it just produces beautiful work and doesn't hurt my hands. And really makes this sort of finishing aspect of it, which I would normally just sort of hand over to my wife or something because I just couldn't handle it, doing it with my hands. It makes it kind of enjoyable for me to be able to take it all the way to the end by myself, without having to ask her to like come in and sand it, or without spending like hours and hours trying to grind down stuff with my hand. And then I think they always have this issue with getting the sort of, not brush strokes, but something like a brush stroke in there where the grit's basically left a mark, and this won't leave any marks. So okay, back to mute for a bit while I did a quick sand down with the 220 and then the 330, and then I'm going to put this cutting board oil on it, and then and I'll probably stop the stream. I also have this butcher block conditioner, which I usually put on afterwards, but I need to heat this stuff up a little bit before I put it on. And this stuff you can just put right on, and you'll actually get to see sort of the color of the wood for that at that point, because now it's actually not really the finished color for those woods, and you'll really sort of see the wood come out. So, all right, quick mic nuke, and back to the music for you guys for a little bit, and then I'll be back as we finish this up. Hey Jane, how's it going? I am working on another cutting board. This one's a lot simpler than the last one. So I started this board I started yesterday, and it's already ready to be, we're already at the final stage right here. This is just a little bit of tack cloth to get the sawdust up, and as I mentioned, it doesn't actually make a whole lot, but it does push a little bit into the wood. So this will actually get most of that. And this is the 330 grit that you came in for, I think, or at least started talking at. But this is the woods that I was using. We started chatting a little bit about cutting boards. If you're not familiar with Chankmania, sorry, I forgot I had muted it. The water is just to get it to raise the grain a little bit, and then I'm gonna sand it again to knock those grains back down to level. So, and then I'm gonna put it back on mute here for sanding purposes, and then I'll cutting board oil is the next step after that. So it'll be short. I don't need to sand it too much. Lady Inspiration, thank you. And thanks everybody for sticking around and watching me work on this this cutting board. So now, because I put that little bit of water on there, the grains basically are super flush. And even after I put a little bit of oil on there, which is the next step, those grains will basically not get lumpy. The surface won't be lumpy. It's just super smooth, super soft, which is the way we like the wood to be. And the next step is really just putting the cutting board oil down. So all the other steps are done, and that's basically it, other than a little bit of this, usually there's one last step, which is you kind of seal it with this butcher block oil conditioner. First the oil, then usually I let that sort of soak in, and then I come back and hit it with the butcher block conditioner as a second step. So this is nice because it actually will get the wood to you get the wood to rise, the color in the wood to basically come out. Is this board suited for chopping diatoms? You know, some woods actually have a little bit of silicate in them. They have what are called phytoliths that are between the grains on the wood, and actual teak, this is African teak, so it's not the same, but actual teak does have some silicate in between the plant cells. And when you cut with a cutting board, actual teak, like what we call teak here in North America, it dulls the blade pretty quickly as a result. Any of the woods that have silicates basically in between the cells will dull the blades pretty quickly, and force you to either sharpen your blades or buy new ones. Diatoms are kind of hard to cut though. One, they're already in two pieces, so they would just fall apart naturally. But two, they're a little bit smaller than the size of what we call comminution, which means it's hard to break them by banging things into them or bumping things into them. They're too small. So sure, you could cut some on it if you could see them, to answer your clearly not serious question, but that is the situation. So this is just the cutting board oil, and it really will let you see what the wood will look like when it's done. This is the actual color of the cutting board, which is the way it should look when my nephew unwraps this, right? So that's the actual color of it. And you can see it really does make a big difference. I think I can put this, hang on a second, I won't quite reach. But you can really see the color of the wood sort of stand out. There's a little bit of a glare, which I apologize for, but the lights in the wood shop down here aren't that great. And you can also, if you saw those, sort of got a quick look at those actual grains, you'll see that some of the woods actually absorb it a lot faster. This maple, the hard maple is actually really dense, but the African teak and the walnut are actually very with respect to these, they're very sort of low density woods, and so they just suck this stuff right up. And we want it to. We want them to because they're basically those pore spaces that are in them that are absorbing all of the oil are. We want to fill those with this cutting board oil rather than having food particles get in there, right? So the entire objective of this is to soak into those pores with something that's food safe and sneaking in learning. Yeah, sorry. I can't help myself. It's what I do. So teaching people. But there are real reasons for why you'd want to put this oil on there, which is basically to try to fill in those spaces that food would fall into, and then you don't want any food or soap or anything else that you're washing the cutting board with. You don't want those to get into the spaces of the actual board. So so it's critical basically that we sort of fill it with this cutting board oil. And as I mentioned, the maple is actually super dense, so it's not likely to absorb a ton of it, but it will get some of it. And then the walnut and the teak, African teak, are probably the two woods on there that need to sort of drink up the most of it. So that's the colors of the woods, which are now, I think, quite well, they were pretty before, but I think you can actually see them a lot better now. And that's the way the finished wood will look. One of the things I think that really stands out is that super dark stripe down the middle, which is wangi, which is this type of wood. And it's almost black, right? So this is black walnut, this is wangi, this is African teak, and on the outside edge here is hard maple. And the cutting board that my nephew was looking at is actually, it had one of these like channels routed in around the outside of it, the one that he was kind of interested in getting. And for a hardwood board, I don't recommend putting one of those on there. Those are really for capturing juices from meat. But you shouldn't be cutting meat on a hardwood board. These boards aren't really designed for meat. You want to chop vegetables or cut bread on it, that's fine, or cheese or whatever. But meats have a lot of bacteria, and you don't want to get that down into the grain of the wood in any level, and it's sort of hard to get it. Yes, sorry, Chang. It's maple, and then that's black walnut, and this is wangi, and this is African teak or Iroko. Iroko, yeah. Yeah, you want to cut on plastic or granite or whatever, but probably not on a wood board. So I wasn't going to put a channel on there. I thought about routing the channel because it looked like something that he'd want, but I just think it's a bad idea because it'll encourage people to put meat on there, and I kind of want to discourage that. The other thing is, because it's a hardwood board, I'm making something that will last a really long time, hopefully, and we don't want to put it in a dishwasher, right? So number one rule for hardwoods, don't put this in the dishwasher. And then you need to condition these things occasionally. So this Butcher Buck conditioner stuff that we have on here is basically got to be applied, quarterly or monthly or something like that. Yeah, you want to totally handle them pretty differently than you do like a typical cutting board where you might cut meat. So you can see that a lot of the oils are basically coming out of these middle woods, a lot of the bubbles, and it's sort of seeping into them, soaking into them. And we just let that sit on there for a while and soak in. This is a reversible cutting board. It doesn't have any feet or anything on it, but so you could use it on any surface and then flip it over and use it on the other side, which is, I think, more useful. In the way that I usually like to buy cutting boards and use cutting boards is to not have any sort of stand or anything on the bottom, legs or feet, because I feel like this actually kind of reduces the utility of flipping it over and using it on the other side. Another thing that's nice about it is this is super thick. As you can see, it's almost the full 2 inches of wood that I started with. And if the wood gets worn down, if it starts to got a lot of knife marks in it, you could refinish it really easily. Just send it through a planer a couple of times, or plane it down, or just sand it down, and then retreat the wood. So, I mean, it's something that could functionally last for more than 100 years if people take care of it, right? So, I like that about it. Um, these boards are hopefully nice special boards, and a lot of my family members have them now, so, I guess when I'm gone, this will be part of my heritage for the family, is this collection of cutting boards that everybody has. Hopefully they've managed to keep them in fairly decent shape over that time frame. And then they can be, on some level, an heirloom for the family. So that's nice. Yeah. All right. So that's basically it for the cutting board. I'm just going to let it sit in here, and in a couple of hours I'll come back down and put another layer of this oil on. And then, so the way that, I don't like the feet, right? Because I think it just makes things a little bit messier. But the way that this sort of pans out will be that in a few hours I'll come down and I'll put another coat of oil, let it soak in, and then probably tomorrow I'll start with the butcher block conditioner, and usually I do like maybe three coats of this for the first one, and then I put a little bit of this in a bottle that I share with whoever I'm giving them to, so they can at least condition it for a little while without having to buy anything. Yeah, this board is symmetrical. The other one I saw was random or mixed. Yes, and I did that because the other board that I created in here, I designed with Pacific Plankton. So like I sat with her and talked about what I was going to do and asked her how she wanted it to look, and she wanted me to make it partially symmetrical and partially asymmetrical. She liked the idea that it would have some elements that were symmetrical and then some elements that were basically completely asymmetric. And I actually kind of like it when they're asymmetric, but my nephew is an engineer, and I sort of felt like he probably would like it a little bit better if it was symmetrical. I don't know if that's true, but I kind of felt like if he had sort of an engineering mindset, that he would kind of prefer to have the board be very symmetrical and not have some elements that were a little bit more sort of artsy in nature. But I've built stuff before. This is probably the 10th cutting board or something that I've made, and I just do whatever. Each time I kind of do what people are interested in. So these really thick boards, like this one, is super thick, and the one that I made for Pacific Plankton was just a little bit thinner than this one. I've mostly been making sort of thinner boards, but I feel like these are probably a little bit more durable. They're less likely to warp, and also this thing is so big I don't even know if you could fit it into a dishwasher. I think it's 23 inches long this is 13 wide. So, that's an advantage, basically. I make it too big to actually fit into a dishwasher, then people won't try to do it. So they won't make that mistake, hopefully. So, forced good behavior, hopefully. So, that's the whole process. You really caught the back end of it. Let's see. Do you know when... Pacific actually, user plus number, she should be on tonight. I was chatting with her earlier, and she said she was going to go out to, sorry, I probably should point this towards my face a little bit more. She said she was going to go out to collect plankton in the middle of towards the end of my SEM stream earlier. So, I had this in mind, and then I've got a watch party that we're watching The Witcher with Hannah at from 11 to midnight, or from 10 to 11. And I think that Pacific Plankton will be there, and then she'll probably stream at midnight Eastern time, which is her normal time frame. So I think she should be back tonight. She's got her booster shot for the COVID about 2 days ago, I think, and she still says she's feeling kind of achy from it a bit. So that's why she didn't stream earlier in the week on Tuesday, and she said she's still a little achy, but I think she was planning on going out to collect, and she said she likely would stream tonight, so she should be around. I'm planning for her to stream anyway. We'll see how it goes. So, because I moderate for her. All right, that's a wrap basically. I think that we'll call it a stream. Find somebody to raid, and then after we get a little dinner and maybe watch the last episode of the first season of The Witcher, then I'll catch some of you guys hopefully in Pacific Plankton stream. And for those people who don't know Pacific Plankton and you don't know who we're talking about, please consider giving her a follow. That's her Twitch information. She's one of my friends on Twitch, and the last cutting board I made actually went to her, as I was talking about. All right, so we'll catch you guys next time. I should find someone to raid, and thank you guys for hanging out with me. This has been a lot of fun. We had a nice little raid in the middle. Had some people hanging out, asking questions. A lot of people complimented me on the cutting board, so thank you for that. And thanks for hanging out and for the follows. And then I'm not going to do any more SEM streams, but I might do a microscope stream between now and when we sort of take a break for the holidays. And then I'll probably will do some streams, as I mentioned earlier, from my family's houses while I'm out of town. So, okay. It looks like paleontologizing is on, and so is Mr. Horologist. And earlier we raided into Glorgana, so I don't want to raid her twice in one day, but maybe paleontologizing would be a good target. So, yeah, thanks for coming in and hanging out, Chang. That's great. Let's see, we'll raid paleontologizing. And hopefully I typed it correctly. Always a question. Seems to be making some movements. Okay, let's go see paleontologizing. And as I said, thanks everybody for hanging out. I love doing woodworking. This is how I get away from my job and take a break and relax. And hopefully this was relaxing for everybody else who was hanging out. You know, it's a fun hobby that I have, and it's nice to be able to share it. So, and then I'll post some pictures of the finished cutting board in my Discord as well. So if there's some people who didn't get a chance to see the stream, you can check it out there. Great. We're gonna take off. So thanks for hanging out with me. Great. We'll see you.
was this close to starting a brand new song, one I've never played live